Welcome to the Intersect Ed Podcast, where the stories of public education policy and practice meet. I'm your host, Morgan Smith, and I am back with you just in time for the 89th legislative session. And heading in, it's fair to say lawmakers have a lot of unfinished business when it comes to education policy. Let's do a brief review of how we got here. If one word defined the legislature's approach to education policy in 2023, it was gridlock. Bill after bill, including crucial proposals for school funding and teacher pay raises, fell victim to lawmakers' battle over vouchers. This only intensified the pressure on Texas public schools, leaving them to deal with teacher shortages, budget shortfalls, and rising inflation as they continued to serve the state's 5.5 million public school students. Today, we'll discuss how our state's leaders can start this session ready to act on essential education policy items and focus on one area you're likely to hear a lot about as the session gets underway: how teacher workforce issues, including a shortage of certified teachers, are affecting Texas students.
It's not like Texas doesn't know what to do when it comes to our teacher workforce issues. Prior to last legislative session, they came out with a couple dozen recommendations under the Teacher Vacancy Task Force report. These recommendations included enhancing teachers' total compensation packages to incentives for hard-to-staff areas.
This is Bob Popinski, the Senior Director of Policy for Raise Your Hand Texas.
But the problem is, only one of those recommendations were actually implemented last legislative session, and the State Board of Education has been going through the rulemaking process over the last year, and that's the high-quality instructional materials. The other 23 recommendations were left untouched, and part of that has to do with a lot of those policies were in the legislative package that failed during our regular session and 4 subsequent special sessions.
There are multiple ways to become a public school teacher in Texas, but traditionally, all of them have required someone who wants to teach to become certified. The goal of preparing teachers through high-quality programs with a clinical teaching component is to combine learning about the practice of good pedagogy and classroom management with practical hands-on experience, says Jacob KIRKSEY, an assistant professor at Texas Tech's College of Education, whose areas of research include the education labor market and teacher pipeline.
That means they're watching a experienced veteran teacher model classroom management. So what happens when a student is disengaged in a moment and you don't want to detract from other students' learning, but you also want to make sure that that student becomes engaged if they're not already? What do you do when you have varying sets of abilities in the classroom based on prior learning, or what students are just simply coming in based on demographic differences in the household? How do you as a teacher manage those differences and make sure that, again, kids are staying on track who are already there, but also that kids are a little behind, those kids catch up to where they need to be? These are all things that you can read about, but they're not always things that it is easy to translate what you're reading into practice, right? And so a high quality teacher preparation experience is one, again, that brings that tangible experience to what candidates are learning in the process of becoming a teacher.
But as Texas school districts struggle to fill vacancies amid budget cuts and teacher shortages with a very limited pool of candidates, educators are increasingly entering classrooms via another route, with no certification at all. In the 2022-2023 school year, uncertified teachers accounted for 1 in 3 of newly hired public school educators in the state, with 43% of them being at the elementary and early education level. They also made up over 80% of new hires in 40 Texas counties. And according to Jacob KIRKSEY's research, almost 3 out of 4 uncertified teachers have had no prior experience working in public schools, and nearly 1 in 5 do not hold a bachelor's degree.
So an uncertified teacher is one that has no record of being in a teacher preparation program. They have no record of completing any coursework. There's literally no record of them in the State Board of Educator certification, which is our state body that issues the teaching certifications.
The consequences of relying on uncertified teachers show up in student outcomes. Studies show that students with new uncertified teachers lose about 4 months of learning and reading and 3 months in math, unless the teacher has previous experience working in a public school. They are also significantly underdiagnosed for dyslexia and miss more days of school. None of this is surprising, as we know teachers are the single most important in-school factor when it comes to student success.
The day in and day out struggle is the pedagogy that's missing, that teaches them how children acquire knowledge. And I think every teacher who comes in the building loves kids and wants to work with kids and wants to help kids. But I see how some of these new teachers who are hired straight out of college, who have gone through a traditional path, hit the ground running as teachers. There's so much that they know about classroom management and how to be prepared, how the kids need to learn something. And a teacher who hasn't gone through that process, there's just so much of that you don't know. And you don't know that you don't know it.
This is Lori Powell, a public school teacher of 17 years who is currently a gifted and talented specialist at Northside Independent School District's Carnahan Elementary School in San Antonio.
A certified teacher has such a bigger box of tools to use to help the students and to understand the process of the learning. And that just takes time and exposure and truly understanding. You can't really put a lesson plan in a teacher's hand and say, read this word for word, and the kids are going to learn. It takes an understanding. So the process of certification and experience is how you get that understanding. That time with students in the classroom and watching the flow with a teacher who's a master teacher is just, it's not something to miss. And I understand we're in times that many of these pieces are unavoidable, but you can't replace it. The learning that happens from that teacher who is refining the art. It's an art and it's a science, and it just takes some time to get there.
Lori Powell says that having an uncertified teacher in the classroom also places an increased burden on certified staff to help fill in the gaps in student learning and to provide the skills and knowledge uncertified teachers are missing.
Nobody's willing to let go of a student and just say, that they're with a long-term sub. That child doesn't matter. I can't help that child. We really look at the groups of students as all ours, that they're all our students. But every weak link, any group is only as strong as its weakest link. And I wouldn't say that all of our uncertified teachers are weak links, but when there's a weakness in the background, then there is going to be a weakness there, even if that is a strong advocate for the kid, and the person.
Uncertified teachers are also more likely to leave the profession sooner than certified teachers. A study that looked at teacher retention rates in rural Texas communities found that only 45% of uncertified new teachers stay in teaching beyond 3 years, while almost 80% of fully qualified new teachers continued in the profession. So, given all we know about the challenges that uncertified teachers face and the benefits of having a well-prepared teacher in the classroom with our students, why are school districts turning to them in the first place?
When you have such a high teacher vacancy, we don't have a lot of people going through traditional certification programs, then that vacancy is going to create some pressure points on districts. It creates pressure points on principals, on the district administration, on teachers.
This is Myrna Blanchard, who is the Director of Talent and Acquisition at Castleberry Independent School District, where she has worked for 4 years overseeing the Human Resources Department. She is describing the bind school districts across the state find themselves in as they struggle to find qualified teachers.
And the biggest thing we don't want to do is allow those pressure points to bleed into being pressure to our other teachers. So if we just don't hire certified teachers and we increase the class sizes of our teachers, well, now our current teachers that are certified are going to start feeling that pressure point. And then now we have a bigger problem.
At a legislative hearing over the summer, some lawmakers on the House Public Education Committee suggested that schools may be turning to uncertified teachers because they are cheaper. That, Myrna Blanchard says, is simply not true.
We still hire them at the same rate of pay as first-year teachers. And the reason why we do that is because competitively for some of those positions, they could go make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 more in the industry and not in teaching. We don't have the option of paying them less. It's not cheaper for us. If we hire uncertified teachers, let's think of this. We've got to train them. We do usually put them with a mentor, which costs money. We also need to support them sometimes with getting their certifications or supporting them somehow in that, right? And so it's the myth of they're cheaper really doesn't pan out because those soft costs that we apply to the time I'll give you an example. The time that I spent as an HR director talking to their CERT program, following up with our uncertified teachers to say, hey, how are you doing? Okay, if you didn't pass this test, what's your next state that you're going to take? Oh, you're confused about that. Let me guide you. That is not cheaper. I'm not saving money by doing that. I'm actually putting time and money as a resource into those uncertified teachers.
The reality is that school districts are hiring uncertified teachers because they don't have any other options. The students are there, and school districts need someone in the class to teach them.
We are asking schools to do things beyond their mission. We're asking them to not only teach students, but to teach teachers. And we aren't going to recruit our way out of this problem. We have to start doing strategies that are going to retain the teachers we have. We need strategies that are going to incentivize teachers who have left to come back. And then we also need to make this a profession that is attractive to the current generation of college students.
This is Jolisa Hoover, Raise Your Hands teacher specialist.
Our schools are having to support these teachers, and they're very grateful to have someone who is willing to step up. But that gratefulness does not mean those people are prepared. And so you're looking at uncertified teachers and support staff having to add to their workload to make sure these people have the tools that they need to do their job.
And until the state addresses the underlying challenges that are forcing districts to turn to uncertified teachers, they will continue to be a growing presence in Texas classrooms, which only hurts the ability of Texas students to get a quality education.
So whether you are a parent, a grandparent, an education researcher, a policymaker, I think what we can all agree on is that we want a high-quality teacher in the classroom who is going to positively contribute to the learning of our kids. And so if we think about what we want that teacher to look like, what we want their experiences to be, we want that teacher to feel prepared. We want them to feel like they know what they're doing. They know how to address challenges that they are going to face. We want them to be able to feel like they are making a difference. And in order to do that, we have to think about the preparation that these teachers have received, the experiences that these teachers have that they can leverage to do a lot of good in the classroom. And we have to think about ways that we can keep them to stay. It all comes down to who do we want to be at the face of the classroom that our kids are interacting with on a daily basis. And that comes down to a teacher who feels prepared, has done this before, and wants to stay.
But here's the good news. As lawmakers gather for the new legislative session, they already have the building blocks they need to improve teacher preparation and retention in Texas public schools. The Future Texas Teacher Scholarship Program already exists but remains unfunded. And as we mentioned earlier, the governor-appointed Texas Teacher Vacancy Task Force has already made over 24 recommendations aimed at attracting and retaining teachers, ranging from compensation, teacher mentoring, and expanded access to training. Here is Jolisa Hoover again.
I think in the end, we may be talking about the issue of uncertified teachers and teacher shortages, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we're actually talking about our Texas students. And this isn't an issue about the adults in the equation. We're talking about children and teens in Texas. If we want to improve student outcomes, Texas must invest in teacher workforce solutions to ensure that all students receive a quality education.
If you would like to review detailed policy recommendations from Raise Your Hand Texas, please visit the Policy Priorities section of Raise Your Hand's website. To stay informed on critical education issues, you can sign up online for Raise Your Hand's Across the Lawn weekly newsletter and text alerts at www.raiseyourhandtexas.org/get-involved. Today's episode was written by me, Morgan Smith. Our sound engineer is Brian Diggs, and our executive producer is Anne Lesang Teet.